I have been feeling profoundly Chinese lately, and it seems a lot of other people have been too, which is confusing, as very few of us are actually Chinese. With the proliferation of social media, particularly the golden boy TikTok, the presence of a Chinese feeling in all forms of Western culture, particularly internet culture, has haunted the West. Increasingly, the depths of this rich nation have revealed themselves to us Westerners, allowing us a view into an obscure world that was hidden up until quite recently. Technology that we lack, nostalgia for a time and culture we bear no connection to, jokes that I cannot even begin to explain, suddenly have been thrust before us, and by God, have we been enjoying it. This feeling has most recently boiled its own essence into a phrase that is repeated endlessly across the wires that connect our world, that you have met me at a very Chinese time in my life. A time in life that many of us seem to be experiencing right now. Most people couldn't explain exactly what this means beyond the feeling, but it feels like it's true. Right now, my life is more Chinese than ever. Not only because there is more Chinese culture around me, more Chinese products, more Chinese people. No, in some sense, I feel like I am more Chinese. Maybe not literally, ethnically, physically Chinese, but in some other mysterious way, and that the more Chinese you are, the better. 俗话说得好，老人读了嘛，说不定是祸福相依。或是我正经的披萨是的吗？ For an individual like me, this stirs a lot of questions. Why am I feeling Chinese? Am I truly feeling Chinese, or do I just like Chinese things? Can one become Chinese? Am I just a generational Chinese meat writer? These are curious feelings that I need answers for. So we will answer them by first talking about China. But before getting into it, I want to acknowledge that this topic could wander worryingly close to being racist, or more specifically, Orientalist, which is essentially a cool way of describing the tendency of Westerners to treat people from the East like they are an exotic, different, and from this, an inferior sort of people. So, first and foremost, it should be known that I hold nothing but admiration for the Chinese people and have absolutely no intention to offend. That said, even admiration, if done in a situation where you are examining the differences between cultures, can risk implying that perhaps they are not the same kind of thing as us. Positive as my video is, I have tried to be mindful of that risk and weigh equally heavily on the West itself. However, this risk is somewhat the point of the video, to analyze the changing perception of China in the West. Thus, I have tried to express my own Western perspective as honestly as I can, and in this may accidentally offend. So, I am open to any and all criticism, and I will read every comment. Back to it. China is a strange place. Having existed for something like 4,000 years, they have a history that is bizarre and, frankly, very alien to me. A great deal of Chinese history often reads like something out of a fantasy novel, which I think is very important to what we're discussing. Take the famous Siege of Soiyang, a great military campaign wherein a rebel army very slowly captured a city loyal to the Tang dynasty. In this 10-month siege, over 130,000 people died. To put this into perspective, the current deaths due to the war in Gaza are around 70,000. Now, relatively speaking, 130,000 isn't a crazy number. Compared to sieges during World War II, these numbers are minor. There are even other ancient Chinese battles with a far greater death toll. But in how many of those battles were 50,000 people consumed? None, actually. There is no other military campaign in history where even close to that many people were consumed. What about the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, a rebel kingdom led by Hong Xiuquan, a man who called himself Jesus' younger brother and God's Chinese son? He led a nation of 30 million people in an attempt to banish the demonic forces of Satan from China. Admittedly, this wasn't ancient and only happened about 160 years ago, but that makes it even more confusing. The same year that Abraham Lincoln was elected, God's rebellious Chinese son almost destroyed China's final imperial dynasty. I could go on and on telling other fantastical stories of things that just actually happened in China, but I only say this all to get to an important point. Chinese people are real-life elves. So said this anonymous sage on the Red Scare Pod subreddit. They have their own magic, They have a many thousand-year history of being led by heavenly god kings. Their traditional architecture resembles wizard towers, with dragons included. Their culture feels impermeable to us outsiders. They live forever. They're graceful, ancient, mystical. How else can I describe elves? Do you know what a yaodong is? It's a Chinese cave home. This is what they look like. As we speak, there are 40 million Chinese living in yaodongs. That is, there are as many people living in caves in China as there are people in the entire nation of Canada. Xi Jinping lived in a yaodong. These are a celestial people we are talking about. Don't worry, I'm not being racist. I also think of all Americans as super mutants. Would you rather be a super mutant or an elf? This mystical feeling is an important part of the feeling Chinese in 2025. I feel as though, while perhaps not very directly, this air of mysticism informs all of my feelings on the Chinese, and I would not be at a Chinese time in my life without it. Just look at all of the Chinese videos that have succeeded in the West. There is an undeniable spiritual tranquility about them. But this is only part of the equation. Yes, the Chinese are mystical, but why are we currently thinking of our feelings about them so often? Well, I think that there is some recent history that can explain this. Despite the phenomena of the internet Westerner beginning to literally feel Chinese having only started within the past few months, I would say that this is the natural conclusion of undercurrents stemming from as early as 2019. While the spread of Chinese culture is something that is extremely multifaceted, many decades long, and far too complicated to understand, 2019 was particularly important to this spread within internet culture for two reasons. This was the year we saw the Hong Kong democracy protests and the first monolithic TikToks. Particularly this one. I hate to say it, but this is probably one of the most culturally important pieces of media due to its impact on world history. Like it or not, this video and its like in many ways legitimized TikTok as a platform and cemented short-form vertical content as our primary mode of media consumption. And then from this we can see the obvious impact on our current topic of discussion. 2019 saw the rise of the mediums of communication that define modern living. Mediums that are particularly internet-based and particularly Chinese. The impact of the Hong Kong protests is a little bit more abstract, but I'd say still important. If you don't know, Hong Kong is technically a part of China, however, for a number of historic reasons, they have a somewhat separate government of their own. In 2019 through 2020, there were a great number of demonstrations held in Hong Kong protesting a bill that would allow criminal suspects to be extradited to any Chinese jurisdiction. The worry was that this would allow individuals to be extradited out of Hong Kong and into mainland China, thus undermining Hong Kong's judicial autonomy. The events of these protests are unimportant to this video. What matters is that videos and posts about the protests, for whatever reason, became extremely popular on Reddit. At the time, it seemed the attitude of the whole site became viciously pro-Hong Kong and as a result, profoundly anti-Chinese. And then just stayed this way. For quite some time, if something even remotely Chinese appeared on the site or China wasn't referred to as West Taiwan, which is very funny, Redditors would absolutely lose their mind. They seem to have no greater enemy. Then, however, at some point, as this mindset began to spread across other platforms like TikTok and Instagram, people began to increasingly realize that serial Redditors are grubs, and basically everything they do is fucktarded. Now, obviously I don't think that this movement towards Redditor hatred completely shifted the Western opinion on China. This was, of course, just one part of a larger current, but I think it can serve as a microcosm for the larger reputational shifts that China saw at the time. It was, at this time, very common to see content on platforms like TikTok expressing a feeling of, why do I see so many people who are just patently anti-Chinese? I personally refuse to dislike something just because it's Chinese. Plus, you people are all weird and ugly. In the year 2025, people have been talking about a Chinese summer, or for us in the south of the globe, a Chinese winter, saying that we've been in a particularly Chinese season of internet culture, and now as it has come to an end, we are in a spring and autumn that is not remarkably Chinese. To this I say, buddy, this was the start of the Chinese decade. You'll be lucky if it doesn't become a Chinese century. So then, after 2019, what has the spread of Chineseness looked like? The output of Chinese culture into the West exists, like many members of the audience, on a spectrum. Wisdom, spirituality, technology, humor, agriculture, and other unknowable things have been fed to us, and it is from these things the feeling of being Chinese was born. TikToks depicting nostalgic pastoral scenes in rural China were among the first to gain widespread popularity with Western audiences, videos which are themselves also massively popular in China itself. Exhibiting the simplicity of a life frozen in time, almost mythological in its presentation. A confectionery salesman is attacked by the joy of mischievous children. A man who finds himself tragically lacking moldy tofu simply resolves to make more with satisfying ease. A young pastoralist in the prairies of northern China offers you her hand in marriage, along with an iPhone 13 and 20 little lambs. A collection of truly heavenly scenes. It's no wonder why the Chinese appreciate them, but it goes further. They transgress a cultural boundary. In watching them, I pine for a simple life in the Chinese countryside. I feel nostalgia for a time that I bear absolutely no connection to. I grieve for something that I never lost. The next pieces of Chinese internet culture to breach the black wall were on the surface what I would call weird jokes, or perhaps just weird videos in general. It is unknown to me what regular low-key Chinese humor looks like. I don't see any Chinese TikToks about why coffee being spelled backwards is funny. Every Chinese joke is bizarre and intense, though this probably is just algorithms selecting for the more exhilarating content that is exciting enough to cross language barriers. But as a result, the idea that the rest of the world gets of jokes in China is certainly queer, and not in the gay way, although perhaps some of it is gay. Tiny little guys singing awesome songs, insane live streams where people are forced to dance, men with big hair do this, strange love stories where heartbroken men dance their pain away, jade merchants sell dubious stones, lots of smoking. It goes on and on. The Chinese produce a great deal of strange yet profound vertical videos. A rather positive development that has come with the spread of Chinese culture into the West is that we have become privy to a great deal of Chinese swag. Unfortunately, we are mugged in many ways. Why do Chinese robots have swag and ours don't? Theirs routinely attack people and wear funny clothes. All ours do is bullshit, like dancing for Jared Leto. Do we have any biomes like this? Don't think so. Even their old people have more swag. I can only hope to achieve old Chinese guy swag someday. It was past this point that the resonance that Chinese things have had with Western audiences became clear. Westerners began to recreate these scenes, admiring the unique approach that the Chinese take to media creation, refreshingly different from our own. Chinese content from Douyin, the Chinese TikTok, and Xiaohongshu began to find its way onto Western platforms, translated. Some Chinese creators would even recreate their content for Western audiences, both now allowing for the profundity of the Chinese spoken word to be admired, not just the dances. Alongside this slow movement in internet culture, it is important that we do not ignore the political context. An undeniable component of this changed outlook on the Chinese people has been the function of the Chinese government. Now, obviously I am not going to argue that the People's Republic of China is without fault. Every government has its issues. I simply think that its unique approach to governance has provided an interesting contrast to other governments across the world. I think it would be fair to say that most people consider the two forces of power in our world to be the United States of America and the People's Republic of China. And when compared, like it or not, there are many things that are admirable about China. As we speak, the United States is completely out of control. There are people being gunned down on the daily. They've got a government seemingly more concerned with fighting itself than conducting any form of governance, a leader who despises half the country, and are declining in a great many measures of quality of life and economic output. Comparing this to China, the average Western person probably doesn't know much about what's going on in China, but It's obviously not this. And their leader seemingly only ever conducts himself with a firm, collected, statesman-like attitude. Somewhat recently, this has culminated into a popular meme depicting Xi Jinping with the caption, "Do nothing, win." Which is to say, if you conduct yourself like the composed and spiritually pure Chinese guy, you're probably going to do better than the American felon. But who's to say? I suppose time will tell. In addition, we cannot ignore the economic context. While we have for many decades now been sourcing our manufactured goods from China, it is increasingly becoming the case that Westerners are seeking out goods because they are Chinese. Platforms like Temu and Taobao are increasingly becoming the marketplace of choice for Westerners who are drawn to the much wider selection and lower prices. Westerners place more and more faith into Chinese institutions. I myself have just recently sourced this beautiful jacket from such a marketplace. I am very satisfied with my purchase. As we approach the current day, the cultural absorption is in full swing. Chinese content has gone from being displayed in its simplest form, to being translated, to being recreated, and now finally, we are forming our own Chinese content completely independently of the Chinese. I think from this was born the very Chinese time in your life. It is a time when something Chinese has been so deeply internalized that you can create your own Chinese things without even needing the Chinese dancing guy to feel it. And it's no wonder. We are increasingly surrounded by Chinese products that have no overt relationship to China. Recently, Labubu, a Chinese product that oozes with Chinese stylistic sensibilities, has become an idol of the world. The most recent popular hero shooter is sexy and Chinese. By God, even the new iOS has a real Chinese feel about it. But the question still remains. When thinking on something, be it a meme, a product, even a life, that feels Chinese but bears no obvious connection to China, then what is it that you are feeling? What does it actually mean for your life to be Chinese? Yes, it obviously means building great cities, investing in awe-evoking technology, playing mahjong and smoking cigarettes with friends, eating Chinese food every day so much that for you, it's just food. Yes, if you go and visit China, you will be experiencing a profoundly Chinese time in your life. But I don't do a lot of these things. I've never been to China, and yet my life feels Chinese all the same. And I don't think it's merely admiration that I'm feeling. In trying to find answers to my questions, one of my initial reflexes was to seek out Chinese entertainment and immerse myself in it. My thinking was that if I could consume enough Chinese books, history, films, TV shows, music, games, and so on, maybe I would find something within that would explain the Chinese feeling. That maybe they would capture whatever has been making me feel Chinese. For the purposes of this section, and I suppose this whole video, I am considering individuals who hail from Taiwan, Hong Kong, mainland China, and all the other administrative regions to be Chinese. Yes, these groups all have varying ties to the entity which is the People's Republic of China, but they could all be considered ethnically Chinese. There are 56 ethnic groups in China. Chinese is a label that applies to many. My consumption of media went as follows. I read the popular Chinese sci-fi novel The Three-Body Problem, sections of the 16th century literary work Journey to the West through Arthur Waley's 1942 translation Monkey. I watched the various vivid and tragic romances of Hong Kong's Wong Kar-wai, the award-winning Yi Yi from Taiwan, a selection of Wang Bing's observational documentaries, particularly the epic Taishi 2 West of the Tracks, and his 2023 Youth series. I watched the extremely popular Chinese dating game show If You Are the One. I played mahjong. I listened to countless Chinese chart-topping songs from the past decade, and through it all, I came to a conclusion. The Chinese love to love. Trust me when I say this, I sought out absolutely zero pieces of romantic media. Everything I watched, read, or consumed was chosen simply due to its popularity. And yet, the air of romance was undeniable in each and every one. Almost every popular song is a love song, waxing on love found or grieving its loss. Wong Kar-wai has made at least 4 films just about Tony Leung yearning for someone he cannot have. Yes, If You Are the One is explicitly a dating game show, but it is one of China's most popular pieces of television and a show where you will see regular individuals philosophize on and debate their love lives in ways that are perhaps impossible among Westerners. And it has an awesome theme song. I highly recommend you watch it. This conclusion became particularly obvious when watching the documentary films of Wang Bing. Wang's directorial style is extremely observational. As much as he can, he seems to simply exist in a space with a camera. He does not intervene in any way. He observes life as it occurs. For the sake of time, these films are very long, I will be mainly focusing on the first entry in the youth series called Spring. The film follows a group of young adults who work in textile factories in the town of Jili in eastern China. Most of them are in their early 20s and are temporarily living in the town for work, having moved from nearby rural villages. Wang spends a year with them, seeing how their lives unfold, the nature of their work, how they spend their free time, and the pressures that come with maturing. It's a very touching film. While we are seeing something that should be rather banal, maybe even torturous considering they are working in what most Westerners would imagine a sweatshop to be, the beauty of youth is nonetheless captured. Working tirelessly, monotonously to sew the clothes we wear, we see them joke, socialize, flirt, dream of futures together. The foundations of marriages are built. A couple pains over what their parents think of their relationship. A boy spends the last few hours he has in town visiting the girl he likes at the end of his shift before he is sent back to his village. Who knows when he may see her next? And it's shown to be so common that life working in a sweatshop is a literally lovely thing. It evokes complicated feelings. Maybe life elsewhere would pay more. Maybe life elsewhere is more picturesque. And yet, I feel they should have nothing to envy at all. For what in the world is more valuable than spending your youth in love? Forgive me, it would be naive to suggest that somebody could just go watch a bunch of American films and read a bunch of American books and then understand America, and I don't mean to do that here, nor do I mean to suggest that the Chinese people all feel like this, but I don't know, this conclusion seems strangely obvious. A detail I picked up from watching these documentaries is that seemingly the average Chinese person spends a lot of time thinking about love. They are constantly listening to love songs, humming them if none are playing, play fighting, flirting. By God, even the weird videos from earlier, how many of those had an overtly romantic plot? I don't mean to suggest that other cultures don't do these things, it's just that there seems to be a freedom among the Chinese to love that perhaps the rest of us could learn from. This feels to me like the core of what it means to be at a very Chinese time in your life. That you've found yourself wanting to live like the Chinese do. I guess I didn't know before, but perhaps that just means to love. Which leaves us with our final question. Is it possible to become Chinese? Well, I have looked far and wide, and apparently the answer is no. The process of becoming a Chinese citizen is apparently exceptionally difficult for individuals like me. The People's Republic of China follows a strong nationalistic policy that rarely smiles on those that, like me, live outside the nation and bear no Chinese ancestry. However, Chinese nationalism is complicated, for, as mentioned earlier, there are 56 ethnicities in China. Thus, the Chinese government guide their policy around the term Zhonghua Minzi, meaning the Chinese nation, a state in which all of the individual ethnicities can be considered a part of a larger Chinese identity. So, with that in mind, If in the future my homeland, Australia, is conquered by the People's Republic of China and my ethnicity falls into that fold, then I may become considered Chinese. So I guess we'll see. However, consider this. A recent discovery of an ancient human fossil in China has led scientists to believe that human beings may have actually lived 500,000 years earlier than we had previously thought, and that our ancestors may have actually ventured outwards from a homeland in China, not Africa. So, in this sense, perhaps we've all been Chinese all along. That is all. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Apologies for the long wait since the last video. I have been very busy helping wage the psychic war against Mike Israel. A heartfelt thanks to all the individuals who liked, commented, and subscribed following my last video. Your support is very gracious. As usual, more videos are on their way. See you.
Let me make something clear. They are not the problem. You are.
You're Chinese.